No one noticed her the night everything began. That was nothing new. Charlotte Fairchild had mastered the quiet art of being unseen long before she turned 20. While music swelled through the grand ballroom and silk skirts brushed polished floors, she stood pressed near the wall, half hidden by a tall potted palm, holding a small book close to her chest like a secret. If anyone looked her way, they looked past her, and so they missed the moment that would change all their lives. The Fairchild family had arrived in New York for the height of the winter season, when gaslight glowed like warm stars, and every evening promised another ball, another chance at advantage. Mrs. Fairchild lived for these nights. She believed the world could be shaped by proper introductions and well-chosen gowns. Her eldest daughter, Lydia, proved her right. Lydia Fairchild was beautiful in the way society adored. Golden hair, bright eyes, a laugh that carried across rooms and drew people toward her without effort. Men noticed Lydia the moment she entered any space. Mothers noticed her even sooner. Charlotte was the other's sister. She moved quietly. Her brown hair was pinned simply, never arranged to impress. Her dresses were neat but plain, in soft colors that did not demand attention. She spoke gently, and only when needed. For 2 full seasons, she had attended balls, dinners, and musicales, and in all that time, no one had truly seen her. She preferred it that way. While Lydia collected admirers, Charlotte collected books. Her father's library had become her refuge, a place where she felt alive in a way no ballroom could offer. Poetry, history, philosophy. She read with hunger and care. Words made sense to her in a way people often did not. In books, depth mattered more than beauty. That afternoon, before the Patterson Ball, Charlotte had been found in the library once again. Sunlight slanted through tall windows as she leaned over a heavy volume, lost in thought. Her mother had sighed in that familiar way, the sound of disappointment wrapped in affection. "Charlotte?" Mrs. Fairchild had said, "No gentleman wishes to speak of such things. You must think of your future. You must think of marriage." Charlotte had nodded and apologized, though the apology was habit more than belief. She had closed the book, but not her mind. She knew what her mother wanted for her, but she also knew what she wanted for herself. The two had never found a way to meet. That evening, the Patterson ballroom overflowed with light, music, and heat. People crowded close, voices blending into a constant hum. Charlotte slipped away the moment she could, finding her place near the palm, opening the small book hidden in her reticule. She read while pretending to watch the dancers, turning pages with care, timing her movements to the music so no one would notice. Her family followed their usual pattern. Mr. Fairchild vanished toward the card tables. Mrs. Fairchild stayed close to Lydia, guiding her through the room like a proud commander. Charlotte faded into the background. Across the room, Lord Nicholas Ashford made his entrance. His name carried weight even here among American high society. At 26, he had recently returned from years abroad, and gossip followed him like a shadow. He had once been known as reckless, charming, careless with hearts and rules alike. The man who returned was different. His dark hair was neatly styled, his expression serious, his manner controlled. Something in him had been tempered by experience. That night, he wished to be anywhere else. Mothers watched him with sharp eyes. Daughters adjusted their posture when he passed. Conversation shifted to draw his attention. Nicholas felt hunted. When he saw Mrs. Witherspoon approaching with her 3 eager daughters, he acted on instinct and stepped aside, slipping behind the nearest shelter. That shelter happened to be the same potted palm. The collision was gentle but sudden. Charlotte gasped softly as she felt herself pressed against a solid chest. Her book slipped from her hands, nearly falling to the floor, before a quick hand caught it. For one suspended moment, neither of them spoke. Nicholas looked down at the book. His expression changed, a sense sublime of something far more deeply felt. He said quietly. Charlotte stared at him. Shock erased her usual caution. She knew that line. Few did. Fewer still understood it. "I did not expect to find Wordsworth hidden here," he added. "And I did not expect to find someone who could quote him," she replied before she could stop herself. Something like a smile touched his face, faint but real. They should not have spoken. Proper introductions had not been made, but something about the green hush behind the palm felt separate from the rest of the room, like a world apart. They spoke of poetry, then of books, then of the strange loneliness of being surrounded by people who never truly listened. Charlotte found herself speaking freely, words flowing without fear. Nicholas listened with an intensity she had never known directed at her. Time slipped past unnoticed. When she finally gave her name, Nicholas recognized it at once. He glanced toward the center of the room where Lydia laughed among admirers. Relief crossed his face before he could hide it. When they parted, both felt unsteady, as though they had stepped back onto land after a long voyage. The next morning, Nicholas stood in his townhouse, staring into the fire, a new copy of Wordsworth untouched beside him. He was not thinking of poetry. He was thinking of a quiet girl with bright eyes who had spoken to him as an equal. "Find out about her," he told his valet. "Miss Charlotte Fairchild." What followed was confusion. When Nicholas called at the Fairchild home, Lydia greeted him with easy confidence, assuming his visit was meant for her. Charlotte, convinced the night had been a dream, remained hidden in the library, claiming a headache. Nicholas sat through polite conversation, searching the doorway again and again. Lydia spoke of dresses and dances. He responded absently, his patience wearing thin. This pattern repeated. Each visit ended the same way. Charlotte avoided him with growing desperation. Once, she slipped out a side door to escape an encounter she felt unprepared to face. The household noticed. Society noticed more. Whispers began. Assumptions hardened. It seemed clear to everyone that Lord Ashford was courting Lydia Fairchild. Charlotte heard the rumors and withdrew further, retreating into silence and books. She told herself she had imagined everything, that a man like Nicholas Ashford could never have meant her. She did not see the way he searched every room for her. She did not hear the frustration in his voice when her name went unspoken. The distance between them grew, fed by misunderstanding and fear, and neither yet knew how close they were to losing something rare. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest Charlotte Fairchild had ever known. Each day seemed to stretch longer than the last, filled with quiet aches she could neither explain nor escape. The world believed Lord Nicholas Ashford was courting her sister, and slowly, painfully, Charlotte began to believe it too. She avoided windows. She avoided visitors. She avoided hope, most of all. Charlotte spent her mornings in the library, her afternoons in the garden when no one else was near, and her evenings pretending to read while her thoughts wandered far beyond the page. Books, once her comfort, now betrayed her. Every poem reminded her of him. Every line about longing felt written for her alone. Nicholas suffered in a different way. He continued to call on the Fairchild home, driven by a stubborn need to see Charlotte, and an equally stubborn sense of duty that kept him trapped in the drawing room with Lydia. Lydia was kind, lively, and unaware of the storm beneath his calm replies. She spoke brightly of social plans, never noticing how often his eyes flicked toward the hallway. He tried to steer conversation gently. He mentioned books. He spoke of poetry. Lydia laughed politely and waved the topics aside. "Oh, Charlotte loves those things," she said once with a smile. "I never could see the point myself." Each time, the words landed like a blow. Charlotte's name spoken so easily, yet her presence denied. Nicholas left each visit with clenched hands and growing frustration. He could not very well ask for Charlotte directly. Society had rules, and he had already bent too many. Worse still, he feared that forcing the matter would only make her retreat further. Meanwhile, gossip tightened its grip. Invitations arrived, addressed to Lydia and Lord Ashford together. Glances followed Charlotte in drawing rooms. Pitying looks replaced indifference. Charlotte felt herself shrinking, becoming smaller even than before. One afternoon, Lydia found her curled in a window seat at the far end of the house. A book lay open on Charlotte's lap, unread. Her eyes were wet, her expression distant. "Charlotte," Lydia said softly, sitting beside her. "Are you unwell?" Charlotte shook her head but could not speak. For the first time, Lydia studied her sister closely. The sadness there was unmistakable. Something shifted behind Lydia's bright eyes, confusion giving way to concern. "You have been different lately," Lydia said. "Is something troubling you?" Charlotte managed a small smile and said nothing. Lydia did not press, but the seed had been planted. The crisis came at the Kent musical evening, an event known for its elegance and strict expectations. Charlotte had tried to refuse, but her mother insisted. She dressed quietly and followed, already planning her escape. She found refuge in the library, standing before the shelves, steadying herself with the familiar smell of paper and leather. Her hand reached for a book at random. Footsteps sounded behind her. "Miss Fairchild." Charlotte froze. She turned slowly to find Nicholas standing a few steps away. His expression was tight, controlled only by effort. "Am I truly so alarming," he asked, "that you must avoid me at every turn?" "My lord," she said, flustered, "I was only seeking quiet." "I have sought you for weeks," he said, his voice low but strained. "I have endured conversations that would test a saint's patience. I have read poetry until my eyes ached, hoping it might somehow bring me closer to you. Why do you hide from me?" Charlotte stared at him, her heart pounding. The words felt dangerous, unreal. "I believed," she said softly, "that you wished to see my sister." His control broke. "I have no interest in your sister," he said sharply. "I never have." The confession hung between them, fragile and shocking. Before Charlotte could respond, the door opened. Lydia entered, smiling, her expression faltering at the sight of them together. "There you are, my lord," Lydia said brightly. "Mama wondered if you might escort us back." Charlotte stepped back, her defenses snapping into place. The moment shattered. Nicholas offered his arm, trapped once more by propriety. What followed was disaster. Lydia, misunderstanding the tension, came to believe Nicholas was behaving improperly toward Charlotte. She voiced her concerns to their mother, who reacted with alarm. Mr. Fairchild, informed soon after, confronted Nicholas with cold anger and demanded he stay away. Nicholas left the house that day furious and heartsick. Charlotte was forbidden from being alone with him. She retreated completely, convinced she had nearly caused a scandal. 3 days passed in silence. At the Morrison ball, everything broke. Nicholas arrived late, his expression resolved. He sought Lydia immediately and spoke to her openly before the assembled guests. Lydia listened, her eyes widening. Then she turned toward the room and spoke words that stopped conversation cold. "My lord's heart belongs elsewhere," she said, "and I believe it is already given." Nicholas confirmed it without hesitation. All eyes turned to Charlotte. The weight of it crushed her. She stood too quickly, upsetting a small table, and fled the room in tears. Rain poured the next morning, soaking London streets. Nicholas arrived at the Fairchild house unannounced and dripping wet. He demanded to speak. What followed was chaos. Words spilled. Accusations fell away. Charlotte appeared at the top of the stairs, pale and trembling. "Is it true?" she whispered. Nicholas spoke then with honesty that left no room for doubt. He spoke of Italy, of emptiness, of the moment behind the potted palm when he had found something real. Charlotte descended the stairs slowly, tears falling freely. "I thought everyone would always choose Lydia," she said. He knelt before her, rainwater darkening the carpet. "I choose you," he said simply. The house held its breath. Charlotte said yes. And in that moment, invisibility ended forever. The house was silent after Charlotte spoke the word yes. It was as though the walls themselves needed time to accept what had just happened. Rain still dripped from Nicholas's coat onto the floor, but no one seemed to notice. Mrs. Fairchild sat down heavily in the nearest chair, her hand pressed to her chest, trying to gather her thoughts. Mr. Fairchild stared as if a painting had suddenly come to life before him. Nicholas rose slowly from his knee, his face open and unguarded in a way few had ever seen. He took Charlotte's hands with care, as though afraid the moment might break if he moved too quickly. Charlotte felt unsteady, not from fear, but from relief so deep it nearly hurt. For the first time in her life, she was no one's shadow. Lydia broke the silence with a laugh that surprised them all. It was not light or careless, but warm and full. "Well," she said, "I suppose I have been doing a terrible job of minding my own business." Everyone turned to her. Lydia stepped forward and took Charlotte into her arms. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I truly thought I was helping. I never meant to hurt you." Charlotte clung to her sister, tears soaking Lydia's sleeve. In that embrace, years of quiet comparison and unspoken doubt began to loosen their hold. Mrs. Fairchild cleared her throat. "Lord Ashford," she said carefully, "you have certainly made an impression." Nicholas bowed his head. "Madam, I fear I have made a mess of everything. But my intentions toward your daughter are honest. I ask for the chance to prove that." Mr. Fairchild studied him for a long moment. Then he sighed. "Any man willing to stand soaked in my hallway and declare himself a fool for love is either very brave or very sincere, perhaps both." The tension eased. Conversation resumed in uncertain but hopeful tones. Tea was ordered, towels were fetched. By the time the rain slowed outside, something new had settled within the house. Expectation. The engagement spread through society faster than the storm clouds had cleared. Whispers turned sharp, then softened. Some expressed shock, others delight. A few quietly admitted they had never noticed Charlotte at all until now. Charlotte herself moved through those early days as if in a dream. Nicholas called properly, this time asking for her by name. They walked in the garden. They talked for hours in the library. He listened when she spoke. He remembered what she said. He told her about his years abroad, about how empty admiration had once felt, how restless he had been. She told him about being invisible, about learning to disappear, so well she had nearly vanished from herself. They learned each other slowly, with care. 6 weeks later, the wedding took place on a clear morning. Charlotte wore a simple gown, elegant in its restraint. Around her neck hung her grandmother's pearls. She carried white roses tied with ribbon printed with lines from Wordsworth. Nicholas watched her walk toward him as though the world had narrowed to that single moment. When he took her hands, there was no doubt in his eyes. The ceremony was quiet but heartfelt. When they spoke their vows, they spoke them clearly, without fear. Afterward, Mrs. Fairchild was overheard murmuring to her husband that perhaps an extensive library was a fine dowry after all. Lydia hugged her sister tightly before Charlotte departed. "Be seen," she whispered. "You deserve it." The honeymoon took them across Europe, not to crowded resorts, but to great libraries and quiet cities. Letters arrived filled with excitement over discoveries, shared jokes and gentle affection. When they returned for the next season, their home became known for evenings unlike any other. Guests gathered not to gossip, but to talk, to listen, to think. Charlotte moved through the room with confidence, guiding discussion with ease. Nicholas watched her with open admiration, never interrupting, never dimming her light. In their library stood 2 reading chairs side by side, positioned for the best light. Above the mantel hung a painting of 2 people reading in quiet comfort, their free hands entwined. Charlotte Fairchild was invisible no longer, and Nicholas Ashford never once looked away.